It's the peak of rose season in the garden of Ron Daniels in Hendersonville, Tennessee. We're going to take a look at a number of types of roses that will perform really well here in the Middle Tennessee area, from climbers to miniatures, hybrid teas, and several other favorites. I can't wait for you to see this garden. It is prime rose season here, and some of your most beautiful ones are these climbers that are on the fence. Tell me a little bit about some of these that you have that are a little bit more tried and true.
Okay, the New Dawn, for instance, is a rose that's been around since 1930. Right. It was one of the first hybridized rose and one that registered, and it just does well. I enjoy growing it because of, well, you can see the flowers, it's unbelievable, but they produce the big flowers, and they do repeat bloom.
Sure.
So, and it takes like, it'll take 30 below zero, and I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Just a good, tough plant.
It is.
And in my experience, pretty disease resistant also.
Oh, definitely. It requires very little
spray. So if people are looking for something that will climb and really take up a good amount of space and be tough, New Dawn is a good one. Right,
and a lot of people, they don't understand, they think they're climbers. They're really not climbers, they're trainers.
Right.
And vines climb, but if you train them on a fence row or a trellis or up against a building and tie them off, they'll do well. So, and then the Don Juan is one of my favorite red ones because it has this beautiful, beautiful red velvet look to it. And it repeats bloom too, just unbelievable.
Right, throughout the summer. And then behind us on the arbor is a really pretty little rose, kind of a nice pink color, and little clusters, pretty good sized clusters of little blossoms. And this, what is the name of this one?
Jeanne Lajoie.
Jeanne Lajoie.
Yeah, and it's of course a miniature, and it's, the rating on it is just unbelievable. Right. It's like around 9.
Right, now when you say rating, what does that mean?
Well, the American Rose Society has a rating system where they test these roses all over the country in people's own personal gardens, and I've tested some here myself. They rate them according to disease resistant, growth patterns of them, how they flower, how they repeat, how they withstand our climate. Right,
so just lots of good garden qualities, and they rate them, what, from 0 to 10?
Well, there's no 0.
1 to 10?
Yeah, and there's no 10, believe it or not. If you get something anywhere from 7 to 9, you've got a good rose. You're in
pretty good shape.
Yeah, right, especially for our climate.
Right. This rose, I believe, is called Gemini.
That's right.
Have you found it to be a really good performer here?
Oh, excellent, excellent. It's an excellent show rose and a great, great cut rose.
What makes a good show rose?
Well, basically, the shape of it, the center, the buds need to be real tight.
Right.
And have a good oval shape to it. And of course, the foliage plays a part in it also.
Sure.
These right now, I probably wouldn't, I'd already cut these.
Right.
Because they are in different stages. But this is probably one of the top 10 show roses out there.
Right.
And wins a lot of blues all over the country.
A lot of times we hear people talk about a high-centered bud, which means that this point is way up high.
Right.
And even on some of these that are a little more open, you can see that really well, that as these petals open, that center stays right up in the top of the rose.
And that's what they look for.
And that's what the judges are looking for.
That's what they look for. So I show on a limited level, but I mainly show to learn, be around rose people,
and learn
more about growing them.
That's great.
But when you show it, you see the best of the best.
Right. All right, now this rose that we're looking at is actually a rose that's not on the market yet. Tell me just a little bit about this one.
Well, every year, being a consulting rosarian, we are supposed to take a rose and plant it in our garden and do a report on the quality of it, how it performs, how it buds, the growth pattern, and report it back to the American Rose Society, which is Roses in Review.
Right.
And that's how they come up with their list of roses to recommend to people.
Sure.
And so this one right here, I call it jailhouse rose, and it don't have a name yet, but to me, I like it already.
So now we're looking at hybrid tea roses, which are, I think, the classic rose that everybody thinks of when they think of roses, and the ones that everybody, really wants to grow.
Right.
And this is a variety called Dublin. And tell me about the roots of this plant, because roots are important in roses.
Right. Well, this is on root type of rose.
Which means that it's not grafted to something else.
It's on its own root. Right. And so it's a great show rose. Dublin has been around a while, and it's in that top 10 also. It don't get much bigger than this. It'll stay about the same height and produce some good flowers. And sometimes it produces them, if you notice it, sometimes it produces in clusters. It's actually a hybrid tea, but sometimes it looks like a floribunda, which it's not. So
Now, while we're talking about rootstocks, there's a thing that happens in roses where, because of being able to produce them quickly, they actually graft the rose that you want, which might be this one, to a different kind of rootstock. And for many, many years, that was the old Dr. Huey rose and various others. Right. But something that's come along in the last few years, this next rose uphill just a little bit, is a great example. And this is grafted to a different type of rootstock than we're used to seeing. So tell me a little bit about that.
It's called Fortuniana, and there's a bunch of people in our society, in the Nashville Rose Society, that's switching over to this, and you can see why. The plant that we just showed you, the Dublin, it's about 3 or 4 years old. This particular signature, it's just 2 years old.
Right.
It's done all this growth.
So it's double the size.
Double the size, and you can see the foliage is better. It shows better, and it does real good.
Really large leaves, shiny and glossy. And
And Fortuniana has real small root systems. In other words, they run way out instead of going straight down. Instead of going deep. So, I think it gets more of what it needs for us, the fertilizer and the water.
Right.
And so it's a great rootstock. They grew a lot of these down south, Mississippi and Florida, and it's graduated up here. And we'll have success. The first year you have them, you have to do a little extra winter protection.
Right. My question was going to be, is it as hardy as some of the old varieties?
It is after about 2 years.
Okay, so it just needs a little more protection on the front end, and then after that, you're in pretty good shape.
You see what you get.
There you go.
Unbelievable.
Proof is in the pudding there.
That's the truth. That's the truth.
Here you have a bed of miniature roses, and for people that don't have a lot of space, this might be a good option.
That's true, and miniature roses is a good rose to start out with as a beginner. And you can grow them in pots or even small areas like I have here.
Sure.
And they produce just as good, and you don't have to be as particular about the deadhead, and you can just kind of trim them off, and they'll bloom right back.
Right. A lot of them have a tendency to bloom more in clusters. So when the cluster is finished, then you can just cut the whole thing off, and not quite as much individual deadheading maybe as with some of these.
Miniatures have become more popular in the last 4 or 5 years, even on the show, in showing people. They have also they have mini floras. I have some mini floras too also, like the Autumn Splendor over here, it's a mini flora, so that means they get a little taller, a little bigger flower.
And we have these great little shrubby kind of miniature roses like Gizmo over here, which has been a favorite of mine for a long time, and good color and lots of flowers. Right.
Gizmo is awesome. It does remind you of a shrub rose, but it's actually a miniature.
The roses that are next to us here are shrub type roses, and shrub roses have become very popular over the course of the past few years with the introduction of Knockout and its brothers and sisters. And but this is one that not everybody might be familiar with.
Right.
What is this one?
It's called Sunrise Sunset, and it's made comes from Bailey's Nursery in California, and I got it 2 or 3 years ago, and it's supposed to be as resistant to disease as Knockouts. And I've had it here. These plants here are 3 years old.
Right.
And I just love the colors.
The colors are beautiful, and great big clusters of blooms. The bloom clusters on these are huge, and it's a little more full flower than the Knockouts are, and maybe a little more classic rose form. And then growing next to it is actually a hybrid of the popular Knockout rose.
Right. It's called Home Run, and of course it only has 5 petals on it, but
a little more of an old-fashioned bloom.
It is, and it don't get as big as your regular Knockouts, but they do well. They have beautiful flowers.
Right. And big clusters and all summer long like the Knockouts do.
Repeats real well.
Great. Now I know that there's a special reason that you grow roses. Tell me a little bit about why you got into this and what you do with your roses.
Well, I've always been somewhat of a gardener, but about 20 years ago I met a man named John Curtis, who was a local rosarian here in Hendersonville, and he kind of introduced me to roses.
Right.
And so he had a ministry with him. In other words, just about all the roses he grew, he'd give away. He took them to his local church, or when you'd see him out in public, he always had roses. And And so I've kind of carried that on. He's passed on now, but
Right.
he passed that on to me, and I use it in my local church and in my community. And I do show roses occasionally, but my main focus is to share roses.
Well, what a great thing to be able to show roses and share roses, and I think we picked the perfect day to be here in your garden. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Glad to have you here.